Good morning, and welcome to the virtual Sunday service for Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Lake Norman. Our fellowship walks diverse paths to find meaning and purpose, but we're united by our belief in the inherent worth and dignity of all and the obligation to express our faith through acts of justice and compassion. My name is Harvey Wigter. I've been a member of the congregation for about 2 years, and I'm now a vice president. I'm very pleased to introduce our virtual speakers, Pat Jobe and Travis Smith. We are so grateful that they are with us today. This morning, their speech will be called, or the service will be called Evangelism. You may think that's an oxymoron, but you'll learn more about it from their presentation. Before I turn the microphone over to Pat and Travis, I'd like to say a few words. This is about D.L. Moody, who you may or may not have heard of. You might have heard of the Moody Institute. But D.L. Moody was an evangelist in the mid-18th century. They said that more than 100 million people heard him speak. Now that's incredible considering the era. And he was quite creative, unorthodox. And I'd like to read a quote from him that might give you an idea of how unorthodox he was. It's clear you don't like my way of doing evangelism. You raise some good points. Frankly, I sometimes do not like my way of doing evangelism. But I like my way of doing it better than your way of not doing it. I now turn the screen over to Pat and Travis.
Good morning. Our opening words are from two novelists, Tom Robbins, who wrote Still Life with Woodpecker, and said at the end of the book, it's never too late to have a happy childhood. And also from Christopher Moore, who wrote Lamb, the Gospel According to Biff, Christ's Childhood Pal. And I have to warn you, if you're thinking about reading that book, that it is quite risque. Biff, the Gospel According to Biff, Christ's Childhood Pal. And in that book, Christopher Moore says, children find magic because they look for it. It's great to be back with the Lake Norman congregation this morning. I want to say again how grateful I am to those of you who are watching online. This is a whole new experience for us in terms of congregational work. And I have to admit, it's kind of crazy. It's kind of bizarre. But I do have good friends helping me out today with this video recording. And I'm so grateful to Allison and Travis Smith, not only for helping today, but for the wonderful ways in which they have welcomed my sweetheart Gabriel and me into Rutherford County over the last 2 years and connected us with like-minded people. And the fact that there now is a budding UU congregation in Rutherford County, North Carolina, is due in large part to the two of them for being with us and supporting us. We're going to talk about UU evangelism today. In this time of social distancing, when we have to stand 6 feet apart in the grocery store, I want you to think about possibly turning to someone who might be behind you, 6 feet behind you in the grocery store line, and saying to that person, let me tell you about this wonderful congregation that I'm part of, the Lake Norman Unitarian Universalists. Now, since we know there's no chance that's going to happen, let's talk about some other things that we might do as Unitarian Universalists to evangelize for our congregations. And I think the best illustration of this is a story about a monastery that was going to close. Way out in the woods, somewhere in Europe, there were 6 old monks who were aging out. And they didn't have any young guys coming along behind them to save the monastery. So it was very clear to them that the life expectancy of the monastery was very low. So the head of the monastery went to the local Jewish rabbi. And he said, what can we do? How can we save our monastery? And the rabbi said, how would I know how you could do that? That's crazy. Why are you talking to me about something like that? I do know that one of you is the Messiah, but besides that, what are you going to do to save your monastery? I don't know. You're a bunch of old men. You're aging out. Go on, get out of here. I don't want to talk about it. So the head of the monastery went back home. And he pondered what the rabbi had said, and he remembered that the rabbi said, one of us is the Messiah. He went to bed that night. He woke up the next morning. He said, wait a minute. One of us is the Messiah. If I'm the Messiah, then I've got to start treating myself with more sacredness. I've got to start valuing myself more. But if one of these other guys is the Messiah, I've got to do the same thing for him. And so he told the other 5 monks, he said, one of us is the Messiah. And all of a sudden, they started being so much kinder to each other. They started treating each other with such reverence and love and joy and celebration. And soon the word began to spread in the countryside. Go visit this monastery. These old guys are crazy about each other. They're treating each other with love and kindness and respect. They're treating each other like one of them might be the Messiah. And pretty soon, young men started coming to the monastery and saying, we'd like to be part of this community where you treat each other like one of you might be the Messiah. And the monastery was saved. So I'm here this morning with Reverend Travis Smith, my dear friend, and I'm going to turn things over to him. What do you think about when you think of UU evangelism?
When I think of UU evangelism, I don't believe that that is an oxymoron. I think some people may initially believe that could be true, but I think it's quite the opposite, because I think it goes synonymous with each other. And the reason I do is because if you didn't think this was a good idea to be a part of, if you didn't think this was worth your time whatever time you meet, whether that's a Sunday or in our case in Rutherford County, we do UU on Wednesday nights, you wouldn't show up.
Right.
So you already have a built-in idea that this is good. Now, if my Greek is what it used to be, I believe that evangelize is to spread good news.
Absolutely.
It comes from the Greek word meaning good news. So if we believe that we are to spread good news, then what is not good about what we stand for in the UU tradition?
Exactly.
Which is loving everybody.
Yes.
Is showing kindness to everyone. Being active in our community, involved in social justice, involved in righting wrongs, involved in actually taking a stand for what matters when it comes to the disenfranchised. If that's not good news, what is? What is?
Exactly. I love that. I love that. So the first thing I want to encourage you to do is to key on how important it is to notice what we're already doing, who we already are, how we're involved, for instance, in other organizations. Maybe some of you are members of the League of Women Voters. Maybe some of you are members of the NAACP or the Sierra Club, on and on. You know the list. And think about the amazing social justice work that is going on in your community. And then think about the people you're doing that with. Are any of those people potential members for your UU congregation? Is there somebody out there that you can hook up with from another group? Do any of these groups meet in the same place where you all meet? Is that a possible connection, a geographic connection? I know that the UU in New Orleans is supported at a 70% level by other organizations that use their building. In fact, the Meals on Wheels program for AIDS victims in New Orleans is supported entirely by First UU in New Orleans. They run that commercial kitchen out of their building, and half of their income comes from that program. So those are the kinds of ways to be thinking when you're thinking about UU evangelism. Think about what else is going on in your community that you're already allied with, or other organizations that share your values. Does anything about that resonate with you, Reverend Smith?
Absolutely. And I think the key for me, when we think about evangelism, is not to confuse evangelism with the idea that we have a knowledge that other people don't have.
There you go.
Because I think a lot of times when we think of evangelism, and rightfully so, because we've been sold this line, that it's somehow, let me bring to you this information that's going to redeem you.
Right.
You know, let me bring this information that's going to actually save you. It's somehow I have that secret, and I'm going to transfer it. When really, again, it goes back to the word, that good news is, what are we doing that is worthwhile? What are we doing that matters? What are we doing, whether it be in our congregation or, as you said, in civic groups and other things that we're connected with? What are we already doing that matter? And then say, hey, you know what? You might find this interesting. That we do that at the NAACP, but you might find it interesting that on Wednesday night in Rutherfordton, we have some of these same conversations that might actually be wonderful to have you involved in.
Exactly.
And to me, that's the good news, is when we start spreading the idea that everybody has a place at the table. Everybody has.
I had an experience in Charleston where I produced a television show, or co-produced a television show with some other folks. And we would talk with the NAACP, for instance, and they would say to us, you know, we're the only liberals in Charleston County. And then we would go to an environmental group and we'd interact with them, do a TV series, a show about them. And they would say, you know, we're the only liberals in Charleston County. It happened over and over again. And every time we would say, no, you're not. Just look down the road. Look at these other folks who are doing this other work. The second thing I want to ask you in thinking about spreading the news about your congregation is, what about your close personal friends? Do you have a tennis partner? Do you have a hiking buddy? Do you have a card playing buddy who shares your values? And does that person know that you're part of the Lake Norman UU? Maybe so, but maybe not. It's just something to mull. Sometimes the closest people to us are the best prospects for new members at the UU. And of course, new members are the lifeblood of any congregation. I know a great story about a couple of retired gentlemen who played tennis together for years. And one of them was complaining mightily about certain values that were not Unitarian Universalists. And finally, his tennis partner said to him, I think you might like this crowd I go to church with. So, as we say, the rest is history. Who are your close personal friends? What relationships are you in that might benefit from a Unitarian Universalist experience? You got any friends, Travis?
I have a couple of friends, and I count you one of the top.
I certainly hope so.
And I do want to say on record, before Lake Norman begins to question, we did not call each other with what we were wearing.
Oh, that's right.
Today, I mean, Pat and I are friends, but we did not coordinate the blue shirts today. But I can say that there's so many of my friends have evolved over the years, and let me go further with that. Is friendships that I have had have definitely changed as I have changed, and I think that most of us, and sometimes this is one of our greatest maybe problems, is that whenever we evolve, we end up finding everybody that thinks like we do,
yes,
and looks like we do from time to time. And I've been guilty of that. So I know that there's definitely some friends I have that would appreciate you. I need to invite them, but I will go ahead and also say that I need to do a little better work at finding some friends that don't believe like I do,
yeah,
as well.
That's an important function of friendship, right? Is finding that common ground of shared humanity, whether we agree about all the issues or not. And finally, I just want to challenge the congregation about social media. How often does anybody post on your Facebook page? Do you use mass email? If you do use mass email, what kind of response are you getting? We need to constantly be looking at our use of social media, because the Spartanburg minister cracked the crowd up one Sunday morning when he said, I've just recently learned that I'm writing a monthly letter to the congregation that nobody is reading. Make sure that what you're doing on social media is effective. Constantly test it. Constantly check yourself on the overall communications pattern of the congregation. I want to close with a thought about the value of this congregation to you. What did you feel like when you first discovered the UU congregation at Lake Norman? How did it feel to suddenly realize that there were people in your community who were that much like you? Now, we as Unitarian Universalists, we don't always agree with each other about everything, but we have that common sense of value. We have that common sense of meeting on common ground and accepting each other as inherently worthwhile human beings, even if we don't agree about everything. So think about that. We claim 300,000 UUs in the United States, although I have heard a president of UUA say it would be tough to find all 300,000 of them. There are easily that many, if not many, many more Baptists in Mecklenburg County. I know that. We are overwhelmed statistically. And yet we have always been on the right side of history. The abolition of slavery, women's suffrage, marriage equality, peace, the labor movement. We have enduring values. That would be quite a sales pitch if we were the kind of people who made sales pitches in line at the grocery store. I know that we are not. Maybe our best option is to just keep doing social action. Keep showing up at the points of social tension around issues like poverty and war and peace. And then when somebody at one of those events asks you, why are you doing this? Just look at them and say, well, I'm a Unitarian Universalist. That's what we do. Thanks again for having us.
Hey, hope everybody's doing well. This is a song of mine called Everybody Needs a Hand Today. I was young and so outrageous, and the weather was contagious, but I'm sliding down that slippery slope today. Can you get your head around it? It's lost until you found it. I'm looking for a little hand today. Ooh, hallelujah, what's it to you? Jump on up, let it through ya. Hey, everybody's looking for a way. Everybody needs a hand today. That's what I'm talking about. Well, I was lost in Encinitas. I was kicked by senoritas, and the sun was getting hotter by the day. Can you really comprehend it? There was no way you can mend it. I'm looking for a corner in the shade. Oh, hallelujah, what's it to you? Jump on up, let it through ya. Hey, everybody's looking for a way. Hallelujah, get it through ya. Jump on up, let it rule ya. Everybody needs a hand today. Darn right. City, making wounds, man, it ain't pretty. I'm selling everything I've ever saved. Hey, I don't need no silver platters. Give me one darn thing that matters. Time is rushing by me like a wave. Ooh, hallelujah, what's it to ya? Jump on up, let it through ya. Hey, everybody's looking for the way. Hallelujah, get it through ya. Jump on up, let it do ya. Everybody needs a hand today. but it needs a hand today.
We're having a cocktail party. It's going to be next Friday. It's going to be virtual. I'll send out a notice to remind you about it next week. Bring whatever you want to drink and bring snacks that can't be shared. Last time we had fun. We will again. We hope to see you. We're not going to pass around a basket this time. We can't do it, but we still have pledges and we still have an obligation to our congregation. So please remember to mail in your pledges. We'll put the address for pledges in the next newsletter. We encourage members to continue reaching out to one another virtually wherever possible. Use Skype, use Zoom, use a phone. Keep hosting books and movie clubs by virtual meeting. It's important we put in the extra effort to sustain the deep bonds our community has formed.
Closing words today come from Roman Payne, which says, "She is free in her wildness. She is a wondrous, a drop of free water. She knows nothing of borders and cares nothing for rules or customs. Time, for her, isn't something to fight against. Her life flows clean with passion, like fresh water."
Thank you, Travis and Pat, for your guidance, for your experience, for your wonderful talk. As I said before, we are very grateful for your words today. So now, let us go forth and conquer the rest of this day and this week. Go now in peace.